Welcome on Her Developer channel. My name is Dima. I'm working on a big solution for musicians. And today there will be an unusual video on my channel. This will be a long video analyzing my previous videos, mainly backend. I will also give many small tips for which there is no point in shooting a separated video. I don't like this format. Think of this as a podcast. And of course I will understand if you don't like the format either. So one day I will make the main ideas from it into YouTube Shorts video. Also I will give answers to the questions that were asked me into the comments. Unfortunately there is no activity under the English language videos. I have a feeling this is unnecessary work that no one needs. Of course I'm talking about English language videos, not about my project. So I will answer questions specifically from Ukrainian language videos. And I got one more point that I hope to solve with this video. The channel is catastrophically lacking in hours of viewing. I need 4000 hours, but I have only 800. This is necessary for YouTube monetization policy. And no, I don't believe in income from a hardcore programming channel. But as I understand, it will allow me to block my video for Russian. Sorry, but over and over I have to ask you to support Ukraine. Russia is a terrorist state. The Russians try to kill me every day. In the last months they attacked a nursing home, a hospital and many other areas where ordinary people live. They also over and over attack energy infrastructure, therefore I don't know if I'll be able to survive in this winter. And most importantly, it does not have any military effect. It is a pure terrorism. So please help Ukraine, support politicians who want to help Ukraine, and maybe you will save me or someone close to me. Thank you. So I have to remind you that my video is not for beginners. Not because it is some sacred knowledge, but because beginners usually don't have enough experience to implement or defend these solutions in existing team or in interviews. This is the case when even useful advice can negatively affect your career. And now I will show one of these solutions. And believe me, it will definitely cause a lot of resistance from your team. So I used a PHP Storm IDE. Of course, I highly recommend you to use it. Overall, JetBrains makes the best product for developers. If you use some IDEA from JetBrains, you know that .idea directory is ignored by Git. This is okay, this was never in doubt. But what if I say that it makes practical sense to add a directory to Git indexing? Not all directory, of course, but some specific files. And some teams practice this. One of my colleagues works in such a team. They insisted on the use of PHP Storm, and everyone was very impressed that the project worked in a few minutes. Of course, my colleague had to do a few simple actions, but that's all. He had perfect connection to Docker, connection to database setup, some project-specific plugins are even installed. Of course, I make a research and understood how it works. First of all, we need to find inside GitHub a repository with name gitignore. Go to global directory and find JetBrains, replace .idea directory from your gitignore file to content of this file and clear the comments if you want, of course. This will allow us to save and share the PHP settings instance, configuration, connection to Docker, connection to database without password, of course, and many other settings without user interface, of course. But my favorite settings allow us to share required plugin between all development team. Not all plugins, but required. For set plugin as required, you should go to settings, required plugins, and select plugin what you want to set as required for this project. Yes, most plugins are individual. But let's talk about Laravel Query plugin. For example, it is a very useful plugin. It allows us to use autocomplete from database fields or database scheme if you want. You can start to write some Laravel for example, select or order by, and idea with this plugin will allow you to select existing one. Also, this plugin works with testing, assert database has, assert database missing, etc. And in real development, exact in the test, you will see the cardinal difference between developers who use this plugin or not. Developers with plugin will write simple readable code, and the developers without plugin will try to minimize typos and try to replace a table name, a table column name to some variables or constant or some properties of test class, make code much more dirty and biggest. So now you know that the developer has this plugin installed and at least has the motivation to write a little but more compact code in your team style. If the developer continue to write in other way, skipping the plugin feature, I believe a few review will change that. And you should know this approach still requires some action from a developer. For example, enter username and password to the database, select PHP instance and PHP unit, but from existing ones. And you should describe this step inside the README file. And as you understood, this approach works with all JetBrains projects, not only PHP Storm. And yes, I know that JetBrains has ability to sync all your settings with plugins, UI, and etc. But it is impossible to share it between all team. And yes, this ability is very useful for a single developer. But now I'm talking about share between team. If you have a developer's team or developer's company, I recommend you to try this approach. It was one more point to developers consistency, developers setup consistency. And you should be prepared for the fact that many new developers will write complaints about .idea directory inside Git without clarifying why this happens for themselves. And don't expect anyone to read the README file. As I say many times, no one reads the documentation. Of course, if you don't have a standard for using IDE in your company or project team, you won't get any profit from this. And a little about personal experience with IDEA. Remember, more than 10-year experience in Ukrainian outsourcing, but with large share of Auth staff. Many developers do not recognize the benefits of IDEA. But I know this is very bad logic. Believe me, in 10 years of experience, I have got through almost all IDEA for PHP and JavaScript. And for this time I never found anything better than JetBrains products. Yes, it is paid, but worth every penny. And of course I know that its founders are Russians, but they left the Russia market and their products are not available there. And I really support this solution. I talk about this in one of my videos, but I should repeat. If you hire outsourced or outstaff developers, often they are afraid to ask you to spend money on the server, on the IDE, or something else, some third-party service. But the same PHP Storm for the team will give a very big boost for both in speed of work and in the quality of code that your developers will give. So please do not deny employees in this, rather start a usage IDE as standard of your project or company. Also, there is such a standard excuse why do not use IDEA is security. IDE will steal your secret code of the airing shop. This is nonsense. Yes, I know they are a secret project without even access to the internet. But I hope you not write it on a PHP. Please do not write secret projects on a PHP, because the same guys who develop PHP Storm write PHP engine. If you don't know. As a conclusion, the tool is important. IDE is a main tool for developers. Not just important, but critical important. Sorry, I forget to say about adepts of fast writing code. Yes, I talk about these guys who enter Vim, could not leave it, and therefore type of code very quickly. To be honest, I don't understand such people and have not met them in real life. I see the problem here because I think in 17% of work, 10% I write a code, and other time I spend for testing and debug. Manual testing, of course. So I honestly don't understand what those people are constantly running with a search speed. If you one of them, please let me know in comments what you are doing on my channel. Go to change the world at 500 characters per second. Do not spend time for me. Now, as part of conversation, it makes sense to answer the question from the comments. One of the subscribers asked me if I use artificial intelligence inside the IDE and outside of it. Here I can say that JetBrains already has an local artificial intelligence or language model if you want. Yes, it can help, but not so much. And once upon a time I tested a Copilot and can give you the same feedback. The problem here is that search models solve ordinary problems as cool as way. But after 10 years experience, you don't waste time on ordinary problems. That's why these problems are ordinary. And for more complex problems, language models do not demand much. for today. And I am not a Luddite. I use ChatGPT too often. Most often I use ChatGPT as something that reads the documentation better than me and had better search potential, but also I speak with ChatGPT as other developers with who I can discuss some ideas, some approach, and etc. And I really want that AI take my job. First of all, there are many other problems that I can help solve in the world. And secondly, if AI replaces developers, it will be a technical singularity, so most of our problem will be resolved anyway. So AI, please, if you hear me, do my job. But unfortunately, it will not replace developers for today. And most likely, I will have more work, since we are not paid for writing code, but for support. And there will be more support because bad developers will use generated code. So IE replace Stack Overflow developers to IE developers, unfortunately. But for today, tomorrow we can all awake in a whole new world. And of course, you should try by yourself. If you think that Copilot or something else help you, use it. I will be happy for you, really. This was completely new content for the channel. A retrospective of past video will follow, but first I have to introduce you to the functionality of what I do. Most likely this will not be an interesting part for you, so use quick navigation to fast forward if you want, but I have to show it so you understand exactly the complexity of what I am developing. And with this knowledge of complexity, you will be able to conclude whether the approach I recommend work or not. This is important because all lessons in the internet show you very simple example, for example to-do list or something else, and complexity is almost never present in these examples. Disclaimer: for simplify, I will limit myself to 3 very simple entities. I believe they will give an understanding of the complexity. And for future investors, those entities are not a killing feature of the project. They are the basic entities, they are mandatory for my work. And in fact, the management is the most difficult part of the code. Everything else will be easier. So let's start with core entity is band. Simple entity, one simple name for complex musician with vocal, drum, and etc. Or single artist, some rapper, or maybe some single DJ. For example, Idris Elba, or an orchestra with dozens of people. Of course, all band have a songs or track. And here I want to talk about naming. This entity can be named as song, as track, as melody, or maybe as composition. This is just an example, but you will always have the question of naming. First of all, if you have project owner and he names this entity in a specific way, track for example, please use this name inside your code. This is the domain level everyone is talking about in DDD. Even if you have already developed something and see that your namings do not match with your owner or your client base, you should rename this in code. Unfortunately, this is a very common situation when you go to the project, spend some day for reading the code, next talk to the customer or product owner, and realize that the code does not contain anything that say about, just because the developers called it something else, and you have to do a lot of work for mapping this information. And also all new developers should do this work. Of course, there is an exception here. We all know directly standard entities that are better left standard. If your product owner called customers as hamsters, please use user table. Do not use hamsters table. And if you have equivalent options, song or track, please select one and use it everywhere. Inside code, inside translation file names, and when you talking with colleagues. And colleagues should use it too. Don't play with synonyms inside code, this is not a rap battle. So go back to my scheme. Looks easy, the band has a songs, but also band has albums, and album has a songs. Looks easy, really easy. And with huge probability, the terms of reference will describe search structure. Of course, I'm talking about outsource, but startups starts with the same way, and I believe many personal projects. And with even greater probability, project owner, project managers, and other top managers will ask you to make MVP for this structure. And I am a big MVP hater, I have said this in some past videos, and now I have a perfect example for this. Because if we think a lot, we can see that songs can be repeated in albums. It could be some collections, remasters, etc. So one song can have multiple albums. Simple one-to-many relationship, easy. And if we think a little more, we can understood that we can have albums with multiple bands. Jay-Z and Linkin Park, or Jay-Z with Forgive Me, Kanye West, and etc. And of course, one song can have multiple bands. I believe you can find example anywhere. Metallica and Lady Gaga, The Lonely Island and Lady Gaga, and millions another example. So now we have three entities with many-to-many relationship between each others. And I should remember you that we have only three entities for now, but in real life it is much more complex. We had genres, languages, gigs, events, musicians, producers, etc. Song can be a cover of any other song, and it is good to describe this, but no one allows you to do this inside MVP. In MVP you have three relations, one-to-many, and that's all. But in the future, of course, you will implement it, and of course not from scratch, because MVP work or is dead and no need to complete it. But of course that's not all. Now we need to understand how this data will get in our database. Of course there is an ideal option. Let's say Eminem learn about my project, go to my platform and create page about himself, write all data correct, and going to manage this web page. Unfortunately this is not realistic, at least with Eminem. But there is a very cool guy, Stan. Stan loves Eminem and wants it to be represented anywhere, including on my website. So Stan can create a band page. The site administration will check that everything is adequate and will publish it. But the band will change. Will release new songs, albums, musicians can switch each others, and etc. and etc. But Stan is not reliable dude. Can put him 5 in a car, go somewhere, and not even send a letter. But it is cool that bands have more fans than one, and they can help keep band page up to date. I have a lot of respect for search fans. I will develop a gamification system that will allow them to stand out on my resource, also stand out in the ear of artists themselves. So Eminem can see that Stan is a cool dude and Stan may not go anywhere. Of course, I have a lot of respect for work of fans, therefore I give them the opportunity to see improvements of others' fun that have not yet been published, and make some reaction for these improvements, that likes or dislikes. Dislikes in my system are a little more complicated. I don't think that tendency to hide dislike is good, and I think the opportunity to indicate why you dislike something, that the reason are much better for content creator, at least. So everything seems to be okay. Fans and site administrations, content managers create and maintain band pages. Also administration can ban haters who use this method for create their hate speech. And someone at this stage, Marshall Eminem, see his already made page on the web resource that collect funds. Therefore, it's most likely that he will want to register on the site and have full access to his band page. Of course, we verify account, is it Eminem or some manager from his team, and give access to the full functionality of the band page. But Eminem has a problem. He does not know Ukrainian language, but he has Ukrainian fans who can offer him a translation of the description of the band or description of the album into Ukrainian, and fan can create some improvements. And now approve should Eminem or Eminem team and not site administration. The other side, Eminem can say, no guys, it's a lot of work, and disable all fan improvements. Of course, I give this option for band administration. And of course, ban administration can add some user to ban list and disallow, create improvement, create some comments, and etc. But for banned content, not for all website. Also, Eminem is not so good in SEO optimization. I believe have problems with keywords. So, site administration content managers can create some improvements for SEO optimization, band, albums or songs page. And of course, Eminem can disable this option. This is your page, Mr. Marshall. Do what you want, but please within the rule of platform. You should understand this is a very simplified explanation. There is an opportunity for administration to select a separated fan who we trust and allow access to run a specific band page until we don't find official band administration administration. So I got two role systems. First of all, it's administration role, the moderator, the content manager, and the administrator, and many others in the future. And the separated role list for ban administration managers, because it is unlikely that Eminem will personally ban every haters. But of course exists functionality that's unique for only for banned administration, only for Eminem. I'm talking about money management. For example, add a links for donation platform or Patreon or something else. I allow only for banned administrator to prevent scam, of course. Also get access for truly unique functionality, which I will focus on. For example, a possibility that will allow you to safely announce the release of album without spoilers. Band manager can create a design, make cover, write songs list, and etc. and etc. But user can see this only after the release. So he can set approximate data, for example, second quarter of next year, or exact data, and even run some timer. Yeah, I know this is not mandatory functionality, but I believe that the feelings of anticipation is important. It also helps those who expected, and also helps for sales. Yeah, I used to waiting for the release of some game, book or movie, but streaming killed the anticipation of music albums. And I want to try get that feeling back. And of course give users the opportunity to subscribe to information about future albums, about future album release. So if your developer experience is similar to mine, you can already imagine how terrible the code will be even in this short, not fully business logic. If you imagine that all this will be implemented on top of MVP, it is better to not look at the code if your mental health is important for you. So all the code I will be showing today does what I describe and more. Of course, I'm only human, I can make mistakes, maybe I forgot about some business logic cases, but the main things what I want to tell, I'm not afraid to change or expand this code. Or in other words, I'm not afraid to support this code. It will be easy to support. So now you understand the complexity of business logic. I can go to the retrospective of my decisions that I showed in the video. So I will start with the first video about infrastructure. It was most popular video on my channel, even though it is very simple. I think this is explained by the law of triviality by Parkinson. But the second reason why it is popular, because someone finally said that there is no need to use microservices anywhere. Now you can see the infrastructure of the project. I got two infrastructure projects, it is Full and Postgres. One fork with PHP Insights fixes inside the third-party directory, and only one front-end project, CO plug. I'll talk about it in video about free front-end hosting. And behind this video I have questions about admins panel in Laravel, why I don't use them. And here's the question arise when I can use them. In real life, any action has consequences. In real project, change in database is not so simple. For example, I make verification and I want to set Eminem as administrator of Eminem band. Looks like simple, create some record in database. We can do this in admin panel, but also in this action I need send a letter to user who now administrator of band to Marshall. Change band status from fans to official, make some notification or letter or push notification for previous band content managers. So now I will have to make many changes inside the admin panel. Rewrite the admin panel for my needs. Also I have to know how this admin panel work and learn if I don't know. They usually use blades, so the project is not longer just API service. All my developer team should to learn how to work with this admin panel, as developers of course from code. Also all my content team should know how to log in this admin panel and how to manage it. And most importantly, we should duplicate the functionality. For example, ban a user. It is a nonsense to not allow the admin to ban the user from the site or from the admin panel. Therefore, we need to implement functionality of ban twice, for the admin panel and for the main site. Also, we need to think about hosting of admin panel, because our site using a single page application or SSR, no matter, so a lot of work. Okay, you can say, but you have dictionaries. languages, countries, genres, and etc. It would be very simple to manage them into admin panel. Yes, you are right, but I call this entity dictionaries because they almost never have changes, and I really don't want to do a lot of work to be able or useful create countries that will almost never be added. In fact, I recommend giving the dictionary administration functionality the lower priority. You will give this job for some junior developer or when you have already solved all other problems on your project. Until then, use Swagger, for example. You won't have to do it that often. But if you use admin panels in your work, you have a simple functionality or you are really an expert in them, of course, I don't mind. But please see who the developer are, because Russians really love admin panels. And I know more Laravel admin panels making for Russians. So you can have all consequences of working with Russians, even in open source. And of course, I'm not expert on admin panels. Last time when I worked it was 5 or 7 years ago, so maybe I am wrong. And also behind this video I have questions why GitLab. Here you should understand that the GitLab develop much more faster than GitHub. When GitHub release GitHub Actions, every news, every technical blogs say it is a big day. Finally DevOps on GitHub without any rankings and etc. But GitLab users didn't care, because they have this functionality for several years. GitHub was very late allowing private repositories. I talk about free private repositories. There are still no project groups on GitHub. Also, you can have self-hosted GitLab. GitLab is open source, so you can see the source code, make merge requests, fix bugs, and etc. and etc. So in my hand it looks like this: GitLab for business, GitHub for open source. And of course, I did not make analysis for all solutions in market, and I don't know what happens with Bitbucket and others. So I hope it's clear for you. And let's go to the next video. In this video my task was introduce you to Git hooks. I also complained a little about developers' lack of understanding of package managers. Sorry for that, but I very often encounter complete misunderstanding package managers. And about branch name linting, you should understand this is a simple protection from typos. You will always know where to find some feature or hotfix. And most importantly, no one in the team will have to apologize for making mistakes when enter not feature but feature, for example. This is a very simple check that should save your time and energy, of course. What about commit lint? I recommend this standard because it's better than anything. This will allow you and the team not to think about the format of the commit message. Of course, this does not save you from all problems, but it already creates an appearance of professionalism, save time your team for thinking, and allow you to make some analysis if you want. Here important to understand that the rule for commit message depends on size of the team. For small and middle team, commit lint conventional is enough, believe me. But if you have 100 developers on the project, priorities for developers are changing. Now your main priority is not make a feature quickly. Now your main challenge is describe your feature, your changes so clearly that other developers could understand why you did that and understand this as quickly as possible, preferably without getting into the task manager. So the rules about description of commit message at least 200 characters are for biggest command, not for your team with 2 developers. So in this video I talk about rebases, merges and semi-line history. And as I say, sorry, I cannot show you how to work semi-line with multiple command, because until now I work alone, but I strongly recommend you to try. Next video was a biggest about Docker with Laravel Octane. All recommendations from this video are relevant, everything works. There were only problems with the SWOOL. Somehow in random ordering, SWOOL blocked database when I ran tests. It was a SWOOL bug and I waiting all summer before it fixed, so I recommend you to update SWOOL to latest. And now it's all okay, all work fine. You can see actual Docker Compose specification, will still grow, this is normal. Also I have questions why I don't use makefile or some SR script or locally deploy with only one command. And yes, I know this is a best practice for a big company or maybe on your company, but for a small teams the setup instruction in README is the only part that the developer will definitely read. And I use this knowledge so the developers, at least in this way, know what they are doing. What does the project consist of? Running Docker, making migration, and etc. And potentially ask fewer questions for me or for other developers. So one makefile is needed to speed up review and test in large teams. But I use a list of commands for educational purposes or for onboarding purposes if you want. Also, as part of a review of this video, we need to talk about Windows developers. I will say what I say to all developers trying to work on Windows. I don't care if you use Windows, but you must be an expert of environment what you use. Me and the whole team use Linux or macOS, so if you using Windows have problems with performance, with speed up and etc., it is not my problem. If you wanna help from team, use Linux. If you cannot solve Windows problems, for example, if you're working from scratch, Windows have a big problem with Docker and you are not going to change it, sorry, but you are not welcome in this team. And yeah, guys, I'm talking about backend PHP developers. I will be honest, in 10 years I have only met one inadequate person who got fired because of it. Everyone else spent some time, realized that it does not work and switched to the Linux. And no, I'm not saying that it is impossible to work on Windows. I simply don't work on it. And I don't want to waste my time for setting up for one person. And most importantly, it is better to work and know the platform on which the production will take place, even if deploying production is not your scope of work. And also a lot of comments why I do not use a style, Laravel style. So very simple, go to Laravel style source code. Please look at this line with command php artisan serve. Per search saying us that php artisan serve is alias for php serve command. Next, go to official PHP documentation and read this red block. I hope it is enough for you, but if not, I say this video not for beginners. Sorry. And yeah, if we talk about aliases, guys, I know that I can make aliases command short. I know that you see over and over when I write docker compose, exec, and etc. and etc. Here I have a personal story. I have a time when I have been actively using aliases specifically for Docker. Then I resigned, and at the very first interview I could not remember the original commands. I looked like a dude who puffed on a resume, on CV, and in general it was very unfortunate. So as you understand, after this situation I use only original commands. So go to the next video, this video about repository registry, GitLab repository registry, and everything I say there is relevant. Build containers once and use them anywhere. And please don't forget, if you don't use GitLab, use any other container registry, it is normal practice. And don't forget about security. Next video is about code style. And I see many people do not understand the main idea of video, or I did not express it well. So, this video not about PHP insights. First idea what I want to say. Use code style analyzers, use linters. You should use it, it is very good practice, it is very comfortable, and it will save you a lot of time. And the second idea of this video. Try to set up linters with autofix to git hooks on pre-commit. This action will enable you to not think about code style at all. All team don't give a fuck. Do you use spaces or tabs? Do you set break lines after quote or before? It is no matter. All your code will be in one code style. Is it force changes? Yes. If you care about something change your code, no, they don't change your code, they change your code style. And of course highlight errors in your code. So now you can see Silicon Valley show and think that my hero is stupid, at least in question about spaces and tabs. And I hope you understand, your code should fix some business problem. But after starting a first review, your code is a problem for developers. Your code is problem for all developers. And yeah, for you too. Someone should make reviews, someone should find your code when try to find something in project. Someone must read your code and update code, etc. And what about PHP Insight? It is a good project, but I don't know why project is dead. So I don't give a fuck what do you use, PHP Stun, PHP Defender, other and other, but please use something. And again, personal experience. I very often come across a review with a message the code is not written in the code style of project. But believe me, those projects don't have a code style. There are usually a dozen different approaches within one file. And in this step, again and again, I have to give a lecture about code style analyzers, linters, and etc. It is very difficult, and it is every time when you are new on the project and spend a lot of my energy. And after that, at very first launch of Linters, they see that they did not have any code style. And yeah, please stop arguing about the code style. Discussion about code style is a part of the love of triviality. So just automate the code style, and most importantly for the whole project, even if it violates some global standard, PSR or something else. And of course, if you have a many project or you are top CEO of biggest company, you should have a standard for all your project or for all your company. So I go next. Very underrated video. Maybe it's my fault, but at least please imagine that you have an automated command that tells you, do you writing a good code or not? Not some shitty code, clear, beautiful code. Most likely your code will be understood by other developers. Yes, I'm talking about code complexity, cognitive code complexity. Now, my code contains 642 files for indexing, with a maximum cognitive code complexity equal to 6. And 6 is only one of more to many relationship what I copy from source of Laravel. Other methods had code complexity 5 or less. And 5 have only a complex test what needs to be clarified, but I have no time for this. Also, cyclomatic code complexity is a bad metric. I set it for 14, and it often misjudged very simple things. And cognitive code complexity for classes I reduced to 16, and 16 have only large tests. I overtest data security tests, access, and etc. And now it makes sense to review a video about tests. Now I have 114 tests. If I run test coverage, I got 99.9 coverage percent. Of course, I can make 100, but code coverage is a bad metric, and a mutation test will show you a really good metrics. And I'm excited about the mutation tests. They force me to write only the code that is necessary. Also, they make me some work for research on Laravel sources. For example, do you know that validation rule sometimes did nothing, return only true. So in general, I'm very satisfied by the mutation tests, but there are downsides. First of all, they cultivate perfectionism. Well, I really want to kill that one mutator from all my merge requests. By the way, the mutators that I wrote myself mostly survive. I'm talking about order by and about first or fail. Also, I never managed to configure the parallel mode in adequate time, of course, but there is a positive here. This will force you and the team to make a small requests. I have a personal problem with this. I really like to do some refactor or bug fixes, no matter is it my bugs or not, or no matter is it my code or not. And of course without tasks. It is very bad for work in team, so slow mutation tests won't let me do that. So this is a positive case. And it allows me to create a better subtasks, smaller subtasks. And the biggest positive plus of mutation tests, the number of flaky tests is decreasing. If you don't know what is flaky tests the tests that fail randomly. It could be because we use Faker, and Faker can generate some unexpected data for us, because we don't freeze time where we check time, or our test depends from some external data. Our tests are not isolated. Flaky tests are the worst tests. They are fail randomly. Usually they fall on those team members who did not write them. They are difficult to catch, it's difficult to fix, and most importantly, tasks with fixing search tests always have a low priority, because this is not functionality, this is a test. So believe me, you will or hate Flaky test now. And with mutation test, you run test at least 4 times. 2 times on your local machine and 2 times on the CI/CD steps. First on commit, second on merge request. And this increases the chance to detect Flaky test at the stage of development, not on the support. And of course it was detected by developer who writes this test. Oh yeah, and there is one more negative case of using mutation test. Usually you write some services, modules or hooks that will be used somewhere else. And you know that this code will be run and tested where it used. But mutation tests say, no man, you do not cover this part. And yeah, if you work in team, best practice say you should cover this code separately. But I understand if you don't want. Also, I'm very happy that my approach to test only give diffs work perfect, because when I run a mutation test, I got those result. Almost 2000 mutations were killed and 100% of test coverage. And of course, I'm going to try mutation test on front-end part. I believe that test front-end is much more complex than test backend. But I will try and give you know. And as you can see, 100 tests spend 45 minutes for mutation tests. Also, I have a little doubt that I'm ignoring everything correctly. I will revise the configuration in the future. Also, I want to say about the number of tests. Very often I come across titles in format I wrote 10k tests and I can write articles. But if you think a little about it, it's just a year of quiet work. If you write tests correctly. As I say, simple rule, one condition, one test. One parameter, one test. I sometimes break this rule. For example, when I validate validation rules, I write a big test with all fields. It is not good, not bad, but simple. If I stop doing this, I will get about 100 more tests. And here it makes sense to talk about the Swagger video. Swagger as documentation works well. I check it on a real project in a real team, but it works only if tests passed according to the OpenAPI specification. Believe me, you will very quickly stop support OpenAPI specification if you not write test for it. When you use Spectator or something else, you will give additional value or payload if you want for writing OpenAPI specification, because otherwise you will still do the same amount of work but in the tests. But in another format, assert JSON or something like this. So you do the same set of actions and get documentation and quick access to manual testing as bonus. And of course we minimize the information gap between client and backend, client as front-end, mobile, API users and etc. And if you have manual QA team, they will force you to write a normal description for your API methods. Believe me, you will get much better grouping and description when QA team will follow this. Also, you should understand this work perfect and looks smaller only with PHP attributes. If you use previous version of PHP 7 or less, you should update. It is right for security and for feature like this. And now you can see how it's look in real life. Now you can see PHP attributes OpenAPI specification for a bunch list with filters by search, filters by statuses, genres, countries, official or fan page, foundation years, and sorting by years, and etc. etc. And yeah, all this description is a little less than 25 lines of code. Also, some code separated into resource. So plus 15 lines of code from JSON resource. Or take a look on update band method. It should say I update almost all relationship and fields inside band. It is due to the design in my head, and no, it not will be a one biggest form, but you will see it in the future. So we got 20 lines of codes in the action and 25 inside request. Very compact for me. But of course this compact is not from scratch. I make some work on it. I make much more shorter work with authorization, pagination, but in fact it is very simple work. Most files in this directory are similar to each other, similar to each inside specific directory. Parameters is a query parameters in URL. We describe on request body parameters, or body response parameters what we return. I updated GitHub repository with OpenAPI specification. You can find a link under the video about documentation, but no, this is not open source. Sorry, but I don't have a time to maintain this code, and this code is specific for my project, but it will be enough for you to fully understand and make your own copy if you want. So I have to say about several negative points. Spectator does not test query parameters, but manual QA or you manually will touch them too often. I hope, if you test, of course. Also, you should update OpenAPI specification before running test, but you get used to it very quickly. Also about Swagger. Swagger has update and now shows subject of methods and description of tags. I think it's very useful. It's allowed to simplify search. So I start describe subject and start describe tags inside repository of any modules. As conclusion, why I reviewing the video in this order? I believe you have imposter syndrome, and this video offer you a technical solution to overcome imposter syndrome. First of all, you always write code in a good code style, no matter of what. Secondly, cognitive complexity. You always write understandable code. You have proof of this, objective evidence, and not someone's subjective opinion, but real numbers that say, man, you write easy code. Also, we write tests, and not simple write tests, we write correct tests. And at least our code works as planned. Maybe it does not work the way the business should, but it definitely works as planned. So we got styled, simple, fully tested code. And finally, with OpenAPI, you write documented code with always up-to-date documentation. This code easy to check, easy to find, and because it's easy to find, you minimize duplication of your code. I talk about minimize method duplication. And honestly, knowing this, you don't need great skills to implement it. Watch my video, take a half of year to get used to it, and live on without imposter syndrome. And for the ideal, you need someone to review your code. I also need someone. Self-review is very complex. You cannot do always perfect. You have naming, you have false positive tests, and other things what a reviewer can find. And one technical skill what I need, but I have not enough inspiration to set up. I'm talking about architecture test, but someday I will set up it and give you know. Also, maybe you have imposter syndrome because you don't know algorithms. I have only one piece of advice here. Please one time understand how annotation works, and annotation examples will give you enough knowledge for web developer. And yeah, I respect the guys who know algorithms. I really want to know it too. I really won't have a time to sit on the lead code or something else, or my dream is going to game dev, but in the next life. So go to the next video, a video about forks. Nothing new, it's just my personal experience. Now it is much more better, but in the past I have a lot of examples when people don't know what they can do with bugs in third-party packages. Do some bad decision, for example adding vendors to Git indexing, but now it is better now, or it is a survivor syndrome, and that's okay because I always take this job on myself. So you should know, make a fork and make changes in some packages, it's okay. And if you're really cool guy, you can make merge request and fix a lib for any users. Next video about IDE Helper, Laravel IDE Helper. It is very useful package. If you don't use it, you should start. Laravel has a lot of magic. And this is mostly the reason why Symfony developers do not recognize Laravel, because the idea underlight and highlight absolutely everything as unknown. In addition to the IDE Helper, please understand the PHP docs. Right now you can see my code and you can see no one is highlighted. That's because where IDE Helper don't know something, I add it by myself using PHP doc. Of course, it is not perfect. I still don't know how to describe in PHP doc Laravel factories methods, but in absolutely most cases it will help you. I should say I know only one negative case in IDE Helper. When I create a model for testing some traits, decorators and etc. inside test directory, it is impossible to ignore all test directories. So I have to add to ignore list all my module inside config of IDE Helper. Otherwise, IDE Helper over and over will create tables inside database because boot method will run it. But it is not critical. If you forget something inside production or stage server, it should not run, because you should not install IDE Helper inside servers. And I believe I can create some methods to detect these models, but need more time for this. Next video is about LogViewer and Telescope. It is very useful packages. Maybe when you work only locally, you don't know about LogViewer. LogViewer very useful on the server. I need just remember you, please add some authorization to access to LogViewer. It is very important. And please don't forget, do not use Telescope on production. Go next video about modules. I have 13 models for now, but the numbers will definitely increase. If you remember, we need model for code isolation. and we want to have ability to replace some model to separated microservice if we need it. I have already tested this modules package on real projects. There are no problems with them, but you can read issues on GitHub and see that someone has a problem with optimization, performance problem. It is not your case if you use Laravel Octane. Otherwise, I do and strongly recommend to you remove all unused code, all unused services, all unused connections. For example, modules without API should not have a router and router service provider. Also in this video I show approach when we isolate migration inside module and publish them when we need it. Now all migration published, and you can see all published migration list. 41 migration, there are not many of them because I work alone. But when you work in the team, when you have a manager, some sprints, every 2 weeks you should publish something. No matter if you want to update this migration or not, you should publish it because you should show something on demo, client should test something, QA team should test something, and of course another team members should use your code. So in real project, multiply migration count by 2. And if you don't isolate migration in module, as I recommend you can simply multiply migrations count by 4 or 5. Because all your merge requests will be migrated on stage server, on any developer's local machine, and etc. And as I say, you will forget about publish migration. I forgot every time. All my team forgot about this. So to isolate migration or not is your personal choice. Also in a perfect team you should have some release manager who should check this, but only in a perfect world. And if you talk about application architecture, it makes sense to talk about actions and connection between modules. As I say on the video, actions is the best pattern what you can use on backend. In my mind, actions on backend is the same like components on frontend. Absolutely best choice as for me. And analyzing the feedback, I realized that many did not understand what's the advantage of actions. The fact is that this is simply a way of storing code. You can use controllers and have no ability to reuse method from controllers, so you should use services for this case. For example, if you want to add user by command line or using API method, without action you have only 2 options: duplicate code or replace code to some service. So it's just a very convenient way to store and run code. Also, many people do not understand how to use as object. I can understand it, it's not the best naming, but consider that this is just a method of your service. As you know, not all service methods return some data to frontend. So imagine some public method, but you replace it to separated file. This file is action as object. Simple. And the biggest advantage of actions is size. Action is small. The test file that cover action is small. If you use action in action, you can simply mock them inside test, of course. And do not repeat tests code. Of course, you need to check with arguments to be sure that you are exactly calling the action with right arguments. So action should run with and arguments. So as I say, it is single responsibility principle at max. One class responsible from one feature, and one feature described in one class, without duplication, without many source of true, and etc. Also, I got a feedback about actions, about too many files inside directory. But come on, you can create your own directory structure. No one can disallow you to create a subfolder inside the action folder, like I do, for example. And of course, if you use modules, the problem is not that big. And yes, actions do not fix your code. Of course, you can write a bad actions. I can't forbid you to write a bad code, but I can recommend you a few more structure patterns or approaches if you want. The standard one, replace all validation to form requests. Form requests are not perfect. I really need some ability to composition for requests, because form requests need to have more duplications. Over and over I should duplicate validation rules. Maybe if you know how to do this, how to make nested form requests without array merge and another dirty solution, please let me know. And yeah, except tests, form request is last things where I duplicate code. Also a common mistakes. You should validate all data on backend, even if you validate data on frontend. Also, if you write custom validation rules, please take a look on error message. They should be clearable and unique. Also, very useful, use sanitizer inside from requests. You should remember it's just a before validation method, but covered in simple package that allow us to reuse code of before validation. Also, if you have some lists with pagination, very important to validate per page, because it is very easy to break your application, enter -1 or 1 million per page records. Your server will die, hopefully by timeout, but maybe not. So do not validate per page is a big vulnerability. First of all, your code will get millions of data from database, and secondly, try to hydrate it inside application server. It is very bad case. And okay, if we talk about form request, I have my personal questionable decision. When I work with some relationship, inside form body I expect the same format that I send to frontend. So if I set a list with slug and name, for example, genre name and slug, I expected from client they send me genre name and slug, object or array of object in the same format. Yes, I will not use name for storing, but this will allow the client not to map the answers. It's because I also work on frontend and I know how much code inside frontend. But in this case, frontend should not think about something. Frontend get object and set object back. Only one exception here, I talk about filters, or about query parameters. Store object inside query parameters is not good, so frontend should get slug and send us query parameter. But it is okay practice because in most cases frontend also change URL at query parameters for save results. So in most cases frontend do this work no matter of what. Also very rarely we should send some payload inside object, and behind the scene we can use it, but it is very rarely. But please be careful, it's just my guess, it is not best practice, it's just my personal experience and my personal decision. And as bonus it saves us from format changing. If we change format, replace slug by ID, in perfect world frontend should even know about this. All should work. Okay, about code structure. Next, where we should isolate code, it's of course JSON resources. They work perfect, allow us to composite, and developers don't need to repeat code over and over. Next, very cool, very beautiful package is model filters. Model filters make your code very teeny, very simple, and have only one problem: we cannot mock model filter. In one of my previous video I show my solution with event listeners, event dispatcher for test environments. I really don't like this solution, but it works. And yes, this is problem not model filters, this is Laravel models, eloquent models if you want, mock problem. So here it makes sense to look at the video about interaction between the modules. This video was very well received. Let me remind you, I implement connection between modules using traits with scoped, eloquent scoped, or using actions. Trait with scopes works perfect, but have one disadvantages. Yes, I'm talking about testing, about mocking model. The same problem as with model filters. I want to add only one thing. For some reason right now I see a lot of recommendation to use new query builder or isolate scoped model methods. And please don't do that. Use traits. First of all, you can run only one new query builder, and secondly, we have a lot of packages that use new query builder and has a conflict with your code if you use it and with another packages. And of course, trait you can reuse. And yeah, it is okay practice if you use trait only for one model. It is normal practice when you use trait for isolate some code. Also allow to remember I use polymorphic relationships or trait connections. It's because I want someday replace some module to separated service with minimal code intervention. So now you can see example of a get list of bonds. Simple action, I get bonds with list of fields what I want to get and thumbnail. It is image, only published, and cursor pagination. And for filter class, bond filter, language filter, country filter, and genre filters. Band filter a little complex because I use PGroogna with specific search query request and with ordering, of course with ordering. All filters I test separated, independent of what, using unit test, but in feature test I just check if event in setup was called or not, and with what arguments. And yeah, in dictionary filters, code almost equal, I just replace slug by IDs and use their has function. So go next, get single band, get one band, simple select translated with genres, countries, language, social links, front image and only publish it. For me it is very simple code. It is very easy to describe this code using OpenAPI, and of course this code has very simple tests. And yeah, a little logic inside JSON resources. If it is not official band, we should hide links for donations. And it is very comfortable to use this in JSON resource. Next, go to the create band method. And here you can see one little things what I add to actions. Using reflection API and PHP attributes, I describe transactional attribute, and now all methods with transactional attribute inside actions will be wrapped inside a database transaction. It was a bit difficult, but transaction makes the code much more complex visually, so it worth it. And yeah, it is optimization and just good practice. Wrap all your saving inside transactions. Because you never save one entity, you always save something else. In my example, set creator, I save the one who creates the band, for future management and for some achievement. But go next to update band. Now you should remember my speech about business logic complexity, about my business logic complexity. So if you have access, you create improvement and update in one time. If you have not access, you create improvement for band updating. And when some from administration approve your improvement, we simply run this action as object and only update fields. And now into update band handle function I send array. It is not so good because band can rename some fields, but improvement can store all field name and we have a conflict or just skip it. And in a perfect world it is good to make separated attributes and all function using PHP named attributes. And of course I'm going to do this, but in the next time, after front-end part. And as you can see, cognitive complexity of these methods equal to 3. We make many store query, update query, but our code is easy and simple to understand. Also, I get 2 test files for this action, unit and feature test accesses and request, unit test as object functionality. Also, I should show you 2 different ways how to write decorators. In some cases, I see the sense to using one method, in some other. So first of all, go to attachment module. I use this module for store all files from users. Also images like front image, thumbnail or user avatar I store here. So I create polymorphic table, has image. This type say me how do I use this image. As user avatar, as band thumbnail, as album cover and etc. For all specific type, I create specific trait decorator. So one entity can have multiple images, band thumbnail, band front image. Also I have a gallery, for gallery I create has attachments and I use it as separated trait. It is very useful, now I always know what kind of image has my band or albums. And I can after complete methods for saving or for getting these images. If you think about performance, just get indexes and performance was the same as you use separated table for all connection. But also I use a different way of decorators of traits. For example, inside users, I have traits has creator, has editors, has reviewer, has team members and etc. In this case it makes sense to separate it to different tables, different polymorphic tables, because we have different payload. Some information about role, about time and etc. And of course I got different work scripts for these entities. And if someday I will see necessity to add payload to images, it is not so complex to break it to separated tables. and I have one module, one trait, which I am ashamed, but I should show it to you. I call this trait as base entity. It contains all repeated business logic for entities like band, albums, and event, and many others in the future. So why I don't like it? Because it is not composition. This trait implements inheritance, and I know you study that inheritance is a best OP practice. But no, inheritance is bad practice, composition is good practice. You can join 1,000,001 controversial threads on this issue. Of course there is an exception, but I talk not about exception now. If you have a choice, inheritance versus composition, and most of all my traits is composition. Has language, has genre, and etc. This trait implement composition. But as base entity require a class change for implementing some base entity methods. But still I need this method because his logic will be repeated again and again. And makes sense to talk about interfaces. In most cases you don't need interfaces. You don't need interfaces for every model, every trait, and etc. Interfaces is a code. And code should do some action, should help somehow. If you create interfaces and not use this interface, just implement it, remove this interface, you don't need it. It is Yagni principle, and yes, I understand, if all your logic implement multiple patterns about fabrics, dependency injection, and etc., of course, you should have a lot of interfaces, because your pattern expects interfaces. But in my case, in my set of patterns, I don't need a lot of interfaces. If you don't believe me, please Google interface overuse problem. One more thing about decorator as connection between modules. Sometimes we really need reverse relationships. If this relationship implement a lot of business logic, I isolate it in a separate trait as band relation, for example. But in simple case, I can describe this relation dynamically, like in this example, and it is very complex example, I don't like it. But this is the complexity of Laravel one-to-many polymorphic relationship hooks, but it is only 40 lines of codes, where most of it is just selection from database and a little struggle with Eloquent. And the most difficult things in this code is accesses, who should see what, and these logic tests get 16 cognitive complexity. I believe I make overtest for this, but security and accessing are important, very important. And because we are here, also I use Laravel policy for isolate access logic. Policy make a check if specific user have access to specific entity. And yes, I use end policy and middlewares. When I ban a user globally, I check in middleware. When I ban a user for specific band, I check policy. And yeah, I think user can some string is a bad call, but I don't know the alternative. Okay, if we talk about access to someone, let's talk how we can store access roles. Generally, we have only two options how to store RBAC and ABAC. ABAC I call ACL because it's easy. RBAC a role-based access control. Admin can create moderators, moderators can ban users. ACL access control list. This list of separated access for all method or action if you want. Both approaches are about global access. Also we can still have accesses of participations if you are creator, if you are owner, and etc. And yes, this is two core approaches. Other is a combination or a mutation of these two approaches, roles with access list and etc. And here my advice, try RBAC. Most likely you don't need ACL. Roles easy to describe in OpenAPI if you want, easy to test and easy to understand. Even by words it's easy to describe. Something like admin and moderator can ban users. And if you create service as service, in my case band management is service as service, you can have related roles. In some band you admin, in some band you moderator. It is also RBAC, but a little complicated. So the conclusion about architecture. First of all, use actions. Inside modules, use actions or scoped traits, decorators or connections between modules. Replace validation to form requests with sanitizer. If you need it, of course. Replace answers to JSON responses. Access logic move to the policies. Access logic for lists move to model filters. and also use model filters for isolate filter logics. This has a few tips that will allow you to write small code that is easy reused. Also, I forget to say, you can mock policy in your tests, and it is very useful. Video about the Enums is relevant. I use Enums very often, of course only in Postgres, don't use Enum in MySQL, and also I used a lot of things from Postgres. Array of enums, array of strings, intervals. It is very easy to write your own cast for interval, for example. Also inside Postgres I use my own column types. For example, if you want to describe unreleased album, you may not know exact release day. It could be just next year, or next year second quarter, or next year in January. So I create specific Postgres type for this, name time frame. It is not necessary, but the same logic I will use inside events. We can describe some festival in second quarter of next year. This is not the best practice, but sometimes it is convenient. In my case, I just isolate logic about selecting, about storing, and about ordering by these fields. And a little demonstration why my approach works. No matter what you open, for example a band model, you can see a band has translatable fields, pluggable, has albums, has songs, has language, has country, and etc. If we go to the action, we can see description, we can see a path to this action if we use it as controller. We can see what we need in request for this method and what we send as a response. If it's not enough for us, we go to the tests and read the name of the tests. Also, if we go to the database, open some table, has a language, we can see who can has language because we use an enum. As you can see, even complex business logic, complex code can be readable. And try to imagine if you write service for this logic. Usually it is a very big service, 500 lines, with biggest code duplication, because it is hard to navigate in this mess of code. So usually duplication is normal because no one can find existing methods. And in real life, teams do not encapsulate all code inside service. Usually you have to search code inside modules, inside controllers, inside observers, and etc. I'm not saying that I write perfectly, but it is definitely better than I usually see on PHP projects. Okay, we go into the finish video about health check. This video I want to say that if you all pages give a status of 200, this does not mean that everything is work for your project. Modern development is a bunch of services. Maybe the queue service is down, maybe the scheduler service is down. Or maybe you will run out of memory inside the server and need to do something today. And I understand this is work for DevOps. But usually DevOps don't give a fuck about your queue service. You should say about it or write your own check logic, as I do. Go next, video number 16. Security scanning, please use it, please don't commit password inside Git. And refresh private key if you commit someday. Go next, video about slugs. Here's I got some updates. After looking closely at the dictionaries, I realized that their slug can be static and carry information. Language code, country code, or in general it is genre slug in English. So I use two different slugs in my system. One static fixed for dictionaries, and second editable, what I show in the video. And I understand it could be complex, but no. Use inheritance, sorry. So they use equal methods. And developers think about this only once when use sluggable or use fixed sluggable inside model. And I know your team will hate you because of this solution. And yeah, it is very useful to use for testing because very easy to enter n inside language and you don't need to get language first. Manual testing, of course. Next video about JOT token versus Laravel Sanctum basic token authorization. I'm very glad that no one came to defend JOT tokens. Next video about Laravel security flags or about explicitly Laravel behavior. I got only one update here. I remove prevent silent discarded attribute because you can see how do I store once update. with all relationship, and I really don't want to write unsets or describe all on fillable or guarded. Other settings looks fine, and of course I use query count testing to detect n+1 problem. And you can see my code. It is very easy to understand how much query I expect. 1 for regular select, base select, and +1 for all with methods. Next video about file storing. All advices are relevant. Don't remember golden rule, store all files on the S3 services. It is a good practice for your mental health. And for image optimization, use image on the fly resize and converter. In my case it is Zubnail, but you can use whatever you want. And please think about security. Don't allow user to update size, width or format on the fly. Next video was about localization in database. I recommend you to use JSON if you use Postgres, but if you don't use Postgres, my subscribers say it is normal practice to create separated table with one-to-many relationship with a separated column for separated translatable field. So you can use this. Next video about full text search, PGroogna. PGroogna perfect work with JSONs, but I find only one problem. PGroogna stop calculating search score when you use left joins or any other joins, no matter. When you search from joined table. Search work, but score and ordering by score not working. That's why I have to create some denormalization for albums and for songs. Now I can search by band name when search albums or songs. And let me talk about denormalization. I got so much hate for denormalization that I apologize every time when I use it. So I try to explain you why I use denormalization and think it is normal. Start with the base information. SQL count is a very heavy performance operation. Count parse all database. That's why Postgres has filter-where methods. And that's why Laravel has simple pagination without count. And a little bit later, Laravel implement cursor pagination without offset, because offset is very heavy operation. So if you think about performance, cursor pagination is the best. Simple pagination have a second place, and the worst for optimization is regular pagination, because we calculate count and use offset select. But let's go to YouTube. Go to some Imagine Dragon video, and you can see that this video have almost 3 billion of views and 22 millions of likes. Do you really believe that YouTube make count function in search big table? And when we go to the main YouTube page, YouTube make 50 count operation with billions of records or trillions. No one run count query. YouTube use denormalization. When you press like, YouTube update this video likes count +1. When you open the video, YouTube just make +1 to views count. That's all. So denormalization is a regular practice. Yes, it is hard to implement. YouTube too often forget make decrement when someone remove comment, for example. Or I ban some user and YouTube forget to decrement comments count. But it is possible and very easy if you write some projects from scratch like I do. My code for now, I have 2 examples of denormalization. First of all about PGroogna and band naming, and second one the same as inside YouTube. I use denormalization for likes and dislikes, even complex dislikes, as I say. Not simple dislike, but dislike with a reason. Because I believe that idea about hiding dislike is bad. It is much more better to force user say why you say this dislike. And 2 rules when you use the normalization. First of all, you should not run count for make +1 and save. You should not select count, make +1 increment or decrement and save again, because transactions not work and you will get wrong results. Inside Laravel use increment decrement functions. Globally it use update count +1. And of course, it is normal practice to make denormalization in existing database. You need just think about migration and that's all. Also, the biggest positive moment of denormalization, we can create indexes. For example, for sorting by most liked, disliked entities or most viewed entity. And let's talk about index. Add to index all fields when you find something, ordering something, or filter something. You can have a problem with index in one case, when you store more often than read. For example, in views table. I hope it is clear, and go to my last for today video about Gitlab Runner locally deploy, but it doesn't matter, run your Gitlab Runner locally or on the server. I see a lot of teams, a lot of projects that don't use DevOps practice at all. I believe this is bad. It is not difficult. So I will continue to write a search video about DevOps practices. Okay guys, that's all. I hope I help someone. Please write, do you like this format as podcast or not? I don't like it. And if I help you, please help me support Ukraine. Your like on Ukraine post can save my life. Thank you.